This 14 by 18 inch acrylic painting was done mainly with a palette knife, followed by glazing methods using a soft synthetic brush. This painting is definitely overall warm, and it has some cool contrast by having the mountain in the background be a little in a blue-green color, and some of the stones in the foreground having some of those cool blues. The main design is diagonal, and the secondary design is perspective, where the path takes you from the front of the painting through and leads you towards the back mountain. Anyhow, I hope you enjoy this time-lapse video, and if you do like it, please hit the like button and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos. This is the photo that originally inspired me, though I didn't like the path on the right and the mountain on the left, so I flopped the image. In Photoshop, I saturated the image by 50 points, and then I also went and posterized the image to level 4. Photoshop can be a great tool for seeing your images in different ways, whether you want to make them brighter or grayer, or to adjust the colors, or to move mountains. Using a large synthetic brush, some GAC 500 that has some glazing medium in it, and squeezing out some quinacridone magenta, I then quickly added a nice ground to the surface of my canvas. I took a blow dryer and got that nice and dry, and then I took my canvas and I divided it into thirds. I like to do this because it makes drawing a lot easier, because my reference also has the third lines on it, so I can look into each rectangle and more quickly assess placement of the different elements within the drawing. Chalk's a lot easier to correct while you're drawing, so that's why I did that first, and then I took the pencil and darkened the lines, and so I'd be able to see them as I continue to add paint to this. Quinacridone magenta is a cool color, and now I'm adding a warm Indian yellow glaze over top of that magenta. The warm and the cool actually create a bit of a dullness, but yet we have this nice warmth and a bit of a glow. Here I'm adding a tinted red oxide to show myself where the shadows will be. I then glazed it after with a bit of transparent red oxide. Here I'm using raw umber and white to create the pathway moving into the mountains. To show where the trees will go, I'm taking Anthraquinone blue and lots of medium and spreading that on the trees with the palette knife. And as I go along, I like to put scratchy marks in there and make sure the point of my palette knife is creating interesting marks on all the edges. It takes wrist and finger dexterity to use a palette knife, so I constantly stretch my wrists and my fingers to make sure that I'm able to turn my hand in all sorts of directions while I'm painting. I darkened the background trees with dioxazine violet and a little bit of magenta, and then I took Anthraquinone blue and tinted it with white to create the tops of the rocks. I now have a light, mid-tone, and a dark area in the painting from which I can evaluate my tonal values. I'm continuing along with different shades of the Anthraquinone blue, and then I'm going in and putting in the edges of the trees where the light is hitting. Where the light will hit, I'm painting a little bit thicker, because the light in a room will hit the bumps of that paint and make it look more lit when the viewer is looking at your painting. This is a glaze of phthalo blue being added on top of the edges of those trees. This is a glaze of a nickel Azo Yellow being added on top of all the trees that we were just working on. Moving into the foreground, I'm adjusting the values and colors of the rocks and the path. These decomposing tree trunks make great directional lines in the painting. They also help to divide the space in an interesting way and add to the sense of the different triangles that we see throughout the painting. The distant mountain is created with phthalo green and titanium white. Titanium white will dull and cool a color a fair amount, so I thought that would sit nicely back into the distance. To create shadows in the mountains, I added some Anthraquinone blue. I found some permanent violet dark paint in my kit and decided I should use it up, and that's what I'm using here. It's been tinted to various levels and scumbled into the sky with a soft synthetic brush. This is cadmium yellow medium plus titanium white added to create that little bit of glow in the sky. I wasn't happy with the values and the colors that were happening in the foreground, so I took titanium white and blocked out the sections that I wanted to redo. I also took the magenta color that was originally a ground and reapplied it, and then took the same magenta, tinted it, and created some of these grassy areas. Here I'm back to using some tints of Anthraquinone blue, and I think I also used a little bit of Phthalo blue and tinted it as well. Once I was happy with the variety of values, the different marks, and the textures, I let that dry, and I took the nickel Azo Yellow and placed a glaze over all the areas that I just worked on. I like the look of this method much better than what I did in the first place on the painting, so live and learn, on we go. I love what happens with glazing. Here the pink turns into a lovely golden color and the blues turn into interesting looking greens. To darken the values and the shadows of the warm colored foreground, I'm adding some dioxazine purple glazes. Using a liner brush, I have loaded it with a thin down mixture of purple paint. The thinness of the paint helps it to flow off the tip of this long thin brush. To add some little finishing touches, I'm using a round brush to add cadmium orange dots and a few bright yellow dots on top of the branches that we painted in. This was one of those paintings where I felt like I needed to do a lot of correcting as I went along. Here I am adding a rock at the bottom of the painting. It's quite nice to have an entry point from the bottom. We do have the pathway at the left, but I felt like we need a little bit more of the cool color down in the foreground. I'm glad I didn't give up on the painting. In the end, I think it turned out okay. I like the overall warmth of it, the diagonal line that runs through the perspective lines that come through the pathway, and the distant mountain. Here's the supply list. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see notice of new videos.